Outlander is a raunchy, romantic TV show about time travel set in mid-1700s Scotland. Oh, we're talking about the car. Oh, okay, my bad. Sorry, I'll do that again. Sorry. The Mitsubishi Outlander is a medium SUV that's been stepping it up in the sales stakes ever since a new generation launched in late 2021. In fact, this marks the first all-new Outlander in a decade. And boy, what a difference 10 years makes. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, give this video a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get more new car content like this. The Outlander I'm reviewing is the LS grade, the second most affordable offering in the range. It has front-wheel drive, 7 seats and a 2.5 litre 4-cylinder petrol engine paired to an 8-stepped continuously variable transmission. The front-wheel drive Outlander LS is priced from around $43,000 drive away, while the all-wheel drive LS is roughly $2,500 more. Back here is a nice wide boot that's got plenty of space for your weekly supermarket shop, although I will say it's smaller than some of the Outlander's key competitors like the Kia Sportage or the Toyota RAV4, and it becomes smaller still when you have that third row in play, which I'll show you in a second. However, it does make really clever use of the underfloor storage here. There's a spot to stow away the retractable cargo blind, there's a place for the headrest for the third row, and there's a space saver spare wheel. Now, getting that third row up is probably best done from the boot, and I'll tell you why. It's because it has these levers on the side here which remotely lower that middle row. So I'll pull that there. That folds that middle row down, which gives you enough clearance to pull this third row up. And you do that by pulling this tab on the back of the seats here. And I will say lots of 3-row SUVs, pulling that tab to get that third row up is actually really hard. It requires a lot of grunt work, but in this, these seats are really nice and light, so it's easily done. Once you've got that third row in play, one annoying thing, as I previously mentioned, is that the headrests are stored under the floor, which means you just have to have an added extra step in getting that third row up. If you don't mind that, no worries, but it is something to note. It can make that process a little longer. To get the car back to its 5-seater position, it's fairly easy. You just pull the tab on the top of the third row here and lower that down. However, you have to go around to the middle row and actually put that seat back from the middle row. There's no shortcut for doing that. And back here in the boot as well, I will say, there's lots of handy features as well. You've got a light there, you've got a little power outlet here, and you've got some tether points there if you need to lock things down to make sure they don't go rolling around. Alright, so thankfully I'm in the cabin of the Mitsubishi Outlander because it is freezing and pouring here in Melbourne. And while there aren't heated seats, which would have been nice, there is really great dual zone climate control. So that's something. Now, in the cabin of this car, it's been a while since I sat in a Mitsubishi. The last car I drove, I think, was the Pajero Sport. And this feels like a car from a completely different manufacturer altogether. First impressions are that it's really clean, minimal, quite elegant in its execution, and it has a lot of stuff in here that I probably would expect from a much higher grade car. For example, this leather steering wheel feels really nice. There's a wireless phone charger, wireless Apple CarPlay, you've got that dual zone climate control I mentioned, and keyless start. So there's a lot of features on here that typically I would expect to pay a little bit more for, so that's something. There's a huge center console, which you'd think would offer a lot of storage, but I was actually surprised to find that all the storage spaces, including the glove box, are on the smaller side for a car that feels quite big. One great thing though is this huge amount of headroom. There's lots of clearance for taller drivers, which is really, really handy. There's a 9-inch touchscreen here which offers satellite navigation, and it pairs really well with the driver display in front of me. They look pretty premium and crisp and lovely, so whilst it's not maybe to the same level as a Mercedes or a BMW or an Audi, it does look pretty swish, and I will say I really love the startup animation, which I'll make sure is included in this video because it looks really cool. A couple of gripes in here. The fabric seats look fine, they look nice, they blend well with the rest of the cabin, so I'm not too fussed about the fact that they're fabric. What I am fussed about is that they're manually adjustable. Although they do offer electric lumbar support, which is something I just found that getting my perfect driving position was made a little bit trickier with the manual adjustment, and personally I'd probably spend a little bit more to get electric adjustment. Secondly, the gear stick drives me a little bit nuts. It's just small and kind of fiddly to use while on the go, and while I'm sure I'd get used to it if I owned this car, I really am sick of manufacturers trying to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, with gear sticks. I wish they'd just stick to what they know rather than introducing all these dials and knobs and buttons and things. Can't we just keep it old school, guys? In the back seat of the Outlander, things feel pretty basic, but they're functional and really comfortable. So I've actually got a fair bit of leg room, toe room, knee room as well with the driving seat in my regular position. But keep in mind, this middle row bench can slide forward and back. And if you do have rear seat occupants, you probably want to bring it forward a little bit just to give them more leg room, in which case you do sacrifice a bit of your own space. But if you're a good Samaritan, then that's something you're willing to do. Otherwise, this rear bench actually folds 40, 20, 40. So you can fold down each of these segments individually, and that's especially handy when you have child seats in this car, because that means you can access the boot without having to remove your child seats. Huge win. Speaking of child seats, I've obviously got mine in here and it fits really easily and nicely. You can fit 3 across theoretically if you want to, because there are ISOFIX points on each of the outboard seats and top tether points over the back, although having a look at it now, I don't think you'd want to try and squeeze 3 in. I think it would be pretty cramped. And if you did have 2 child seats in here, then look, it would be a tight squeeze, but there's room for a middle occupant. Family buyers who are wondering about safety will be thrilled to hear that the new Mitsubishi Outlander gets a 5-star rating from ANCAP. And that's noteworthy because it was tested in 2022. And every year, safety criteria gets more and more stringent and harder to get a 5-star rating. So this is as bad as 5-star as 5-star gets. On top of that, the LS grade, in addition to the ES grade, adds extra safety tech as well. So you get a rear cross traffic alert and reverse autonomous emergency braking. That autonomous emergency braking system can also detect pedestrians and cyclists and function at nighttime. So this is the 3rd row of the Mitsubishi Outlander, and I will say I've driven a few 7-seaters recently, including the Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace and the Skoda Kodiaq, and this is by far the smallest 3rd row I've experienced, particularly in the headroom department. This sloped roof means I'm really bumping my head and I actually feel like I'm really hunched over. It's very uncomfortable. Knee room and leg room isn't terrible for a 3rd row, but keep in mind that I actually have moved this middle bench forward, so the people in the middle seat are lacking in leg room, and to be honest, it hasn't made enough of a difference for me. So this is a really tight space. I think it's definitely mainly for kids. If you have to carry adults, it's doable, but I wouldn't want to be in here for any more than 10 minutes. Another thing to note is that getting in was actually quite hard. So because of the higher ground clearance and the smaller door opening, I actually really struggled to get in between the gap in the seats. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're sort of pulled over and loading people in on the side of the road, or you're at sort of a time crunch, that can prove difficult. And I did find it was a bit of a fiddly process. I had to contort my body in ways I'm not used to. So yeah, I'm not loving it back here. There are cup holders, so that's something. And there's a few little sort of neat storage slots in here, but other than that, I don't really have anything else. And there's something worth noting, that while the seatbelt reminders extend all the way to the 3rd row, the curtain airbags do not. So if you're a parent who's quite preoccupied with safety, which is very understandable, and you've got kids back here, just keep in mind there's no airbag coverage in the side here for them. Now, Mitsubishi offers a 10-year, 200,000 kilometre warranty, but there's a catch. So in order to access that extended warranty, you have to commit to servicing your car exclusively at Mitsubishi dealers, and you have to stick to the prescribed service schedule. So that means every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. If you don't do that, then the warranty reverts back to 5 years or 100,000 kilometres, and that's actually not so great when you compare it to the competition with, you know, things like Kia offering 7 years and lots of the manufacturers offering unlimited kilometre coverage. So that's worth noting. Meanwhile, servicing is available on a capped price plan for 10 years at around $3,190. So that works out to around $319 a year, which isn't too bad. All right, so I'm behind the wheel of the Mitsubishi Outlander. I've put it into drive with that fiddly little gear stick, which, as I've already mentioned, I don't love. But anyway, moving on. And I will say straight off the bat that I don't love the driving position in this car, and that's because I feel like the bonnet is quite high and I feel like I'm lower than the bonnet and I don't have a clear view of everything around me. So I do wish I was a little bit higher up and had a bit more elevation just for visibility's sake, but what can you do? I will say, however, when you're parking and maneuvering, 2 huge wins are the front parking sensors, so they're really handy to have, and again, A great addition on a car of a lower grade and something you don't always get when you're shopping the bottom end of the range. And on top of that, the 10.6 metre turning circle is actually pretty good for a 7-seat car, so it does feel like it can get around in tight city streets, which is a win. So the continuously variable transmission pairs really nicely with the engine, and while it doesn't sound great as you get higher up in that rev range, it works really nicely. It just saps the car of any sense of sort of fun and punchiness. However, overall the powertrain is a really willing companion. Although it does sound louder and a little bit thrashy, it's really responsive and immediate and quick, and it just feels like a really seamless, nice driving experience. I find the ride comfort great. I still feel engaged with the road, but it kind of takes the edge out of any bumps. Although over sustained harshness, it can feel a little bit fidgety. And if you hit a really hard edge like a pothole, it can unravel a little bit. So it's not perfect, but for the most part around town, you'll feel pretty comfortable. I also really love the steering feel in this car. The steering wheel is nice and chunky and substantial and wrapped in leather, and the steering is light, but it's actually really direct in its response, so you don't have to put too much effort in and you get maximum output. Now obviously this car is front wheel drive, and whilst I haven't really had to encounter any traction issues in my week of driving, I would expect that most buyers won't really notice that lack of all-wheel drive unless you're really regularly heading down dirt roads and that kind of thing, or if you want to drive maybe in sort of wet weather or maybe even snow. You probably won't need that all-wheel drive system. It's just an added peace of mind benefit. In summary, I would say that the strong points of this car is certainly the sort of polished powertrain. The CVT pairs really nicely with the engine. There's plenty of power reserve there. The steering wheel is really nice and light and easy to maneuver in small spaces. The turning circle is excellent as well. So it's a really ideal city car, and it's got enough power there for when you go on the freeway and need to do longer stretches. And the downsides for me personally is that I don't love the driving position, although everyone's different, but I can say that across the board, most people will find this rear visibility a bit limited. Of course, you've got blind spot monitoring and things like that to make up for that gap. Personally, I like to be able to see out the back, and I do feel like that's lacking in this car. So I'm really hoping I don't blow away while I'm talking to you, because it's a very windy day here in Melbourne, but I can tell you this new generation Outlander is a huge improvement on the model it replaces, and in my opinion, a big step forward for Mitsubishi in general. The willing powertrain plus the active safety and driver assistance tech on the LS grade make it the perfect around town companion. Plus, Mitsubishi's conditional 10-year warranty and cap price servicing are added peace of mind, provided you're willing to follow Mitsubishi's quite strict rules. The one advantage the Outlander has over its competition could also prove to be one of its shortfalls: the third row. What I'm saying is that it does feel like some versatility and cabin space is compromised in order to squeeze in those extra 2 seats, and they're really only good for short runs. My tip would be to also check out the plug-in hybrid Outlander, which, although it's more expensive, offers more power and could improve your fuel economy. My other tip would be that if you haven't watched Outlander the TV show yet, it's really worth a watch.